Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at some more of the South Bend secondary line. This time from Holy Cross Junior College south to the end of the line, which includes the street running on Niles Avenue. Here's just an overview of the line in question, just to get your bearings straight here. We kind of see South Bend, of course, the South Bend metropolitan area, Notre Dame here to the north, and in red is the line in question that we're going to be studying and following. Now this line kind of started up around the junction right up here where they call it Portage Avenue, but that's really not correct. But the location here is where the MC connector, which is this line which went through the west side of South Bend, joined up with this big north-south Michigan Central line, which was the South Bend secondary, and came southward. So this starting point here was milepost 961. This was just south of Notre Dame and just north of the Holy Cross Junior College. And it kind of came down south. There was a runaround track through the Holy Cross Junior College campus area. Then the track just kind of winded straight down, crossing 31, and then down Niles Avenue into areas where there was industry located. There were sidings here to the right. There was another kind of a little branch over to the left down to I&M, and the line came all the way south to the end of the line, milepost 1172. And then there was a freight office and a depot for the Michigan Central kind of in that area. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. Okay, up here, this is just a overview of that area again with Holy Cross Junior College, just kind of giving you more bearing of where the line ran through the Holy Cross Junior College area down south to Angela Boulevard. We have US 31 to the right, Holy Cross College in the middle, and you can still see a little bit of the old grade of the connector. This here now is a map of the Conrail track chart, which kind of shows graphically this line in detail as it existed probably in the late 70s or about 80. And we can kind of see here the same situation of what we're looking at. Right up here was the junction. Here's the MC connector going off to the right. Here we see that runaround track. All the streets that were crossed, Angela Boulevard, Pokagon, Leaper Avenue, US 31, Howard North Shore Drive. Then it progressed down to Niles Avenue. And then we have Soren Street, Cedar Street, and Madison was the kind of the end of the line in the final days of Conrail. Here we see the Rose Fuel spur that was still in existence. And they still show to the right the segment going south, which crossed the East Race and then went down south a piece to the I&M generating station plant. Now it's interesting because you can kind of see here a little bit, if you can read this, that was penciled in, probably one of the prior owners of the booklet that this map came out of, where they had written in here to Plymouth. Now this line did not continue on to Plymouth. They must have got confused with the Pennsylvania line on the south side of South Bend, so that's just kind of an interesting notation here. But now let's continue. Next up here now we have the picture of probably the middle 2010s, just before abandonment, where we still had a little bit of the MC connector in place. This is right about where the junction was. You can still see ties here from where there was a switch. This was the switch, and the red line marks kind of show where this track then went straight south down Holy Cross Parkway and through the Holy Cross Junior College area, which looks an awful lot different in this picture than it did in the older days. But this was kind of the location of the junction. This was milepost 961. Next up here we have a older picture. This is courtesy of Tom Burke. We would like to thank Tom for letting us use a bunch of his pictures for this this line, because there's not that much available that I have, and so these really help. But these are pictures that he took just before this line was removed in the early 80s. And now this is a good look here of what the Holy Cross Junior College area kind of looked like. This was probably kind of south of their main entrance, but you see the main line track here heading southward. To the right you see that runaround track, which was used by the crews to maneuver cars when they were operating this branch down to Rose Fuel, and it was also used to assist when they was making the coal moves to Notre Dame and St. Mary's College. So this is kind of a look at this now, what it looked like then, I should say. Next up here, we see the crossing at Angela Boulevard. Behind a camera and to the left was the old St. Joe High School building. This is what that crossing looked like heading south. Now this all here now is the East Bank Trail, which runs over quite a bit of this line down almost to Niles Avenue. Next up we see Pokagon Street up in the distance, where the track also crossed and then started to bear over to the left as it will be approaching US 31 and the bridge. Just before we get to US 31, this is a picture of the apartments that were located there to the left. There's still apartments there now. I'm pretty sure it's the same building, although I'm not totally sure on that. But you kind of see the rough appearance of the track here. Pretty much just a cinder bed at this point, but it still is in place. Now we get a look here at the US 31 bridge. Good look at what the track looked like. This now all paved trail. Next up we see the bridge on Leaper Avenue. A little bit different style of a bridge, but a good look at what the track looked like there. Again, this is all paved now. Here's one of the famous Strombeck photos. This was John Strombeck's 1974 look at that Leaper Avenue bridge, with a Penn Central locomotive and train passing over it, probably after having serviced Rose Fuel and Materials with a L&N boxcar in tow. Another look, caller this time, of the Leaper Avenue and that Penn Central locomotive crossing. Now we see the North Shore Howard Street area crossing. This again is kind of looking southeastward, quite a bit of a hill there on North Shore Drive, but the track's still in place, looking to be washed out quite a bit at this point, probably from the all of the water running down that hill. This is pretty much the same location, but looking northwest there we see what the East Bank Trail looks like today on this historic route. Here, this kind of, okay, that's good. This kind of zeroes in on the area here. This location here, there was a Hegarty Street at that time, but we see Niles Avenue here to the right. Here's the line coming down. This is kind of the location now where the dog park is located. And we see that this line, it actually showed another siding of sorts here. I'm not sure exactly what kind of industry that was. But this line then just came straight down south, and then it got on to Niles Avenue and continued south. Here is Crescent Avenue here off to the right. We'll look at this area in some more detail. Here's another detail look at that area. Here's Crescent and Niles. Here's the Sunny Italy Cafe. We're going to see that in pictures here shortly. But then there was a switch here in the middle of the street, which we'll see that also. And this is kind of where we had the two branches, one going to the left here and then southward, and the one to the right continuing south, and all the tracks in the vicinity of where Rose Fuel and Materials were. There were several tracks and industries there at one time, and probably even a yard. Here we see that same train street running down Niles Avenue. Of corner of Soren and Niles. To the left there we see the Sunny Italy Cafe. To the right we see the Old Modern Packaging Incorporated. What's interesting to note here is this switch in the street. You see all these kind of loose planks and stuff. Uh, Street running switches were a real challenge and a maintenance headache because they had to have breathing room in order for the moving parts to move, and also to have access for the throw handles to throw the switch. So normally there were either removable planks or trap doors or metal doors that opened. So that's kind of what you see here. Next up here, we get another shot of the kind of same location, but a little bit further south. Again, here's that track that went off to the left and down to I&M. Here's the street running that continued on down south on Niles Avenue. Again, Crescent Avenue is back in this area here. This, of course, is Niles Avenue here up in the foreground. Another closer look again at Crescent Avenue there, and of course Niles Avenue here. Here now we kind of get a look at what that intersection area looks like today. Again, quite a bit different. Some buildings gone, some buildings still there, but definitely all the track is gone. Now we're going to take a look here at this Sanborn map again for this area to get a better idea of the detail here, because it gets a little bit complicated. Here was this track coming down. Generally what we're dealing with here is kind of a main track that just came straight down and continued down south on Niles Avenue, which Niles was actually called Emmerich at that time, but this is Niles Avenue. Here's all the industry and yard stuff to the right here. Of course, this being the location of the Rose Fuel and Materials in later years. Here we see the South Bend Lathe complexes. This line came right down south through there and crossed Madison and crossed the East Race here. We'll see a shot of this bridge later. Now, there's also more sightings in this South Bend Lathe area. One it shows coming down here, and it kind of looks like there was something here, even though they don't show the entire connection, but it looks like it might have ran through here somewhat. So a bunch of sightings in this area nonetheless. Next up, we have just kind of overview currently of the way things look. A little bit messy, but just kind of showing roughly how the tracks came down over what's existing there nowadays, which is an awful lot different from what was there in the past. So let's continue here now, and again we're going to zero in on this Cedar Street area, which kind of is where the Rose Fuel and Materials was in here in the later years, and then most of this track kind of dead end right at Madison, though the main still continued going down south to then cross Niles again and continue south to the end of the line near Jefferson. We'll see that later. And then of course this line that was over to the left continuing to come on down south, crossing Madison. Here's a look at that street track more coming down Niles Avenue. This is approaching the, eventually getting down to Cedar Street and the Rose Fuel and Materials. We see another switch embedded there in the pavement, which there was sightings that went into that area as we saw all the sightings. Here's a close look at that switch in disrepair and falling apart. It looks like it's caving in. Probably the rotted planks or whatever now posing a traffic hazard, but you can see there was a switch there with two tracks. It looks at the very end there was just one track remaining, which was this one right here, which was used for the Rose Fuel and Materials. Here we see that track continuing again, also evidence of yet another track to the right. Like I say, a lot of tracks in this area at one time, but this is what remained in the final years. Continuing south again, this is a look at what the Cedar Street area looks like today. Much different with modern buildings and such. But as we will see here now on the next slide, this is what it looked like back in that day. Here was the Rose Fuel dock, and this was getting close to the end of the line at Madison at this time. Here we see the end of the line at Madison. Here it says milepost 1172, but I don't think that is correct. The 1172 would have been the true end of the line, which we'll see here later, almost down to the Jefferson area. But we don't have any solid information on what exactly the mileage was here. Now we take a look at an old overhead shot of South Bend back in the day, and you can kind of see here these same buildings that we just looked at. We see here kind of these buildings which were curved around where this track came down into the Rose Fuel Materials area, the warehouses that were in existence at that time, and all the tracks that were in this area. But that's kind of what that looked like. Okay, now we bring up another Sanborn map here to kind of zero in on this line to the left that we talked about. Here's where that came down and crossed the river again on a bridge we will see here shortly. It crossed LaSalle, and then it kind of made a curve into the Indiana-Michigan Electric Company property. And here was the big coal pile where coal was delivered. And then this track came down and ended just before Colfax on the I&M property. Here's a look at that bridge. This picture was taken from the monon.org. There's a lot of local area rail pictures there. That's a good site to check out. So if you're inclined, you might want to go there to get more information and additional pictures. But that's what that bridge looks like today, a part of the East Race sidewalk system, and you can still see the supports underneath. This was the original railroad bridge. This also is a continuation of that bridge on the other side. You can kind of see the bridge a little bit here in the far background, and this was the track that was still embedded in a parking lot on the other side. I believe there's no evidence of this anymore. I think that things have been changed there, but it still was there at this time. Now we bring up another map to kind of follow this track down south even more here, just to get your place here. Here's Niles Avenue and the main track coming down Niles again and coming right down the street, crossing Colfax, and then there will be some switches down here which led to two other spurs here to the left, some kind of a coal business here as well as other industries. Continuing to come down south here, we see this same track again, crossing Colfax, Niles Avenue here to the right, and some switches here and crossovers, and this gets down into the area where the Michigan Central Depot and the Michigan Central Freight office were located. Again, looking at a little bit more detail, going a little bit farther south here, we see that track in more detail just to the left of Niles Avenue. And then here finally on this last picture, we see Jefferson Boulevard down here. Here's Niles Avenue here. And this is kind of where the track dead ended. This would be probably the true milepost 1172. Here's just kind of another overhead of that area with the red lines kind of showing where the track used to be over what is in existence today. This is a shot in that Michigan Central Depot at northwest side of Jefferson and Niles. This was kind of the area where the Emporium restaurant parking lot was located. And this is kind of what that depot looked like. So just to kind of put a finish to this, we'll also mention here kind of the history of this line. The secondary line coming down straight south into South Bend was built in 1872 by the Michigan Airline. Now, the Michigan Airline was leased by the Michigan Central, and then the Michigan Central formally merged with it in 1916, and that continued till 1930 when the New York Central leased the line and then controlled it. So it was under Michigan Central control for many, many years, and that's why it's generally referred to as Michigan Central by most people historically. But then, of course, in 1968, Penn Central took over what all was left, and then Conrail came along in 76 and took it over, and then it was abandoned in the early 80s by Conrail. Well, it was removed in the early 80s. There's actually some discussion about when it was actually abandoned. The literature shows indeterminate 1975, but I know that not to be true because I remember there being boxcars sitting at the Rose Fuel and Materials in the late 70s and probably even maybe about 1980. So when this thing was actually formally abandoned, it's anybody's guess. So anyway, I hope you got some useful information from this. Like and subscribe. If you could get as many people to subscribe as you can, we're finding that 80% of the people that are watching the videos are not subscribed. And it really helps us little guys because, there's a lot that goes into putting these things together, getting pictures together and videos together. So, at least to see a little bit of appreciation for our efforts goes a long way. Up next, what we're going to do is we've already covered the MC connector, but we're going to be doing a deep dive on portions of the MC connector. That's this, the connector, of course, being this whole section here on the west side of town. We're going to kind of be focusing here in the middle to correspond with what is going on with the coal line trail construction, which is now ongoing. Phase 1 and Phase 2 will be beginning shortly. So we're going to just hit that area and go in a little bit deeper, show some new pictures, some new information, and some new maps. So again, thanks for watching. See you next time.